Okay, Andy, this one is for you. We are a smallish organization, about a $3 million annual budget. Side note, many organizations would be drooling for that size budget.
Kill for a $3 million annual budget.
Just going to say, but anyway, I guess it's all relative, right? Sorry, that was just me piping in. So, okay. So organization that's got a $3 million annual budget. Recently, we got the good news that a major foundation is coming to tour our facility and learn more about the work we do and how we are managed. This foundation has a reputation for asking really tough questions, particularly when it comes to finances. Other than knowing our numbers inside out, what questions do you think we should be prepared to answer?
Oh, boy. I love tough questions, especially tough finance questions.
Ooh, yeah. So what would you ask, Andy, if you were going to do that?
I wouldn't ever do that. So if I'm looking at right, I wouldn't ever try to stump the chump while we're going on a tour. I think that would be rude, is my opinion.
Yeah.
I think you can get 90% of what you need to know off of the grant application and any materials that you're asked, and then looking at things like the 990 and the annual report and the audited financial statements. I think from a finance perspective, I think that's most of the information can be got there. So yeah, know your numbers inside out is really the answer there. And I'm curious what kinds of other random questions that would be tough that a funder would ask you that you wouldn't automatically know. So here's one of the things that I learned early on as a finance person is never to do math in my head. I'm super good when I'm sitting at my desk and I've got a calculator next to me and I've got Excel cracked open and you ask me something super complicated and I could bang out an answer for you really, really fast. But I want to have the scratch paper down so that I know I'm giving you the correct answer. Because there's something, it's just me, right? If somebody asks me something hard, my blood pressure goes up, my brain stops functioning, and I just will say the first thing that comes to mind, right? Especially if it's a hard question. So how many people did you serve last year? Oh, 82. I don't know. It's just just freak out.
Yeah.
So
brain
I would
freeze.
have, if it were me, I would have some notes, just to make sure that all of the numbers that you've calculated that you think are important for them to know are at hand. And so you can look things up if you need to. Expecting somebody to be able to rattle off things like your fundraising ratios or what percentage of your donors are, in your last direct mail, what was your response rate for your returning donors? Those kinds of things you shouldn't actually be expected to know.
And I'd be curious because, the person who wrote this said, gosh, other than we need to know our numbers inside out. And to your point, Andy, I don't know, first of all, we don't know what exactly this funder is going to ask, right? So even though there's a reputation and what's hard to one group is easy to another. I have found in kind of my experience over the years, when foundations come and ask, they'll ask things more so talk to me about, how does financial oversight work in your organization, right? What's your board's role? What's the staff's role? Who's handling the finances in your organization? What's their background? What's their experience? So it's a little bit, how does your budget align with your strategic priorities? It's stuff that's a little bit of a more global, bigger picture question is what I have found most funders ask. And they, and those are all good questions, right? But, the other thing is, I've had some funders, at one point I worked for an organization where the funder said, so, if your resources shrunk, or, by 10% or grew by 10%, if your annual budget, what would be the impact? So sort of showing, that kind of gets to do you have the operating reserve? Do you have whatever, so I think, I don't know, I would try not to get too tripped up and into feeling like you need all those numbers memorized. And to Andy's point, then you have brain freeze. Maybe you just really make sure you've got the core, here's how we're managed as an organization financially. Here's how the oversight happens. Here's how we make sure checks and balances, some of those key questions that funders should care about. And if they ask you those detailed questions, I think it's more than fair to say, I want to give you accurate information. So can I get back to you on that? Like that's ridiculous. I mean, and I don't want to get upset about something that hasn't happened, but if someone does, right? No offense, funders, but if you're asking something and you want something really specific and detailed in the moment, that's not cool. So yeah.
The other thing that always used to make me crazy is when people would ask hypothetical questions.
Yeah.
So say there was a global pandemic and everybody needed to work at home for 2.5 years. What would you do then? And you're like, I don't know. I've never thought about that. Right? It's this, your hypothetical question has made me have a lot more questions. Right?
And now it's always keeping me up at night. Now I'm worrying. Because
I'm super worried about that one thing, right? Which would never happen. So I don't know. I think Stacey's exactly right. Just make sure that you know what you know and say you might need more time to come up with something different. Maybe the reason people think they're asking questions is that they're specifically drilling into things that they've noticed by looking at the rest of it. So for example, if they think you're weak on cash flow, a question like Stacey posed, which was if you saw a 15% downturn in revenue over the next year, what would you do? Maybe that's because they're trying to prod you into saying something like, oh, we have a line of credit for $1 million that we can tap at any time, because they didn't see that in the materials that you provided them before. So I don't know. Again, this one feels like a trap question because we don't know what they're going to ask. And I don't know what really tough questions they would ask. So it's hard to give a good answer.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board. Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing. Nonprofit resources.
The Alliance for Nevada Nonprofits presents Nonprofit Everything, the podcast about everything nonprofit, with your host, Andy Shurick and Stacey Wedding.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Nonprofit Everything. So I will give you a sneak peek behind the scenes. Andy and I started this podcast recording today talking a bit about how we are really, really curious to get feedback from you. Sometimes it can feel a little bit like we're doing this in a box when we don't hear from anybody. So we want to know, what's working, what's not. Do you know people who used to listen who aren't anymore? We would love to invite your feedback because we are always trying to make this better. So please just ping one of us. Tell us. I promise we're not going to take it personally if you hate it. Tell us what you hate, right? We want to know it. So we want to keep improving, and we're open to any ideas you have as well. So with that, we just are so glad to have you as our listeners. We couldn't do this without you and without your questions. So where to keep them coming, either ping us directly or find us on any of the social channels, podcast channels, nonprofiteverything.com. We are easy to find. Thanks so much.
Before being hired into the world of nonprofit, I came from the corporate sector. In my new job at this nonprofit, I've been tasked with organizing some of our fundraising events. Other than keeping costs down, I'm curious as to how nonprofit events differ from for-profit events and what I may need to keep in mind as I plan events for my organization. Any suggestions?
I think that the end user experience is what you are striving for in both situations. So I don't think there's any difference with that. From a standpoint of, from the minute someone comes into your event, and if there's a registration table, how does that flow to the next point of entry, the next place you take them for your event, to, the food, the entire sort of array, you want the person to go, wow, this was a good experience. And I don't think that varies in for-profit versus nonprofit. I think that in nonprofit, you're probably going to see a lot more, it's got, my personal opinion is events should have some sort of tie back and focus back to the mission, right? And always finding a way to embed the mission in the event in some way, in a way that reminds you of the cause and why you're there. And the fundraising pieces, right? Like, I don't know I haven't probably been to enough for-profit events or corporate events to be able to say, but like you go to a corporate event, usually you are just the receiver, but like nonprofit event, you're also trying to like hit all those emotional chords. So maybe people will give you more at that event, whether it's, whatever those tactics are, whether it's a raffle, silent auction, live auction, whatever, like just make a gift to the organization for its great work. Like, so in order to be able to do that, you're going to have to really sort of share a story and strike an emotional chord with me. So like, I don't know. So I think that's where I would assume you'd see the biggest shift. It just looks probably a little different. Like instead of like a for-profit that's trying to get me to be a repeat customer, maybe buy their new product or whatever the purpose of the event is, like it's just a different end goal. But I think there's a lot of things that are transferable. And I think sometimes nonprofits use no money or no budget as an excuse for having a subpar event. And the reality is that even with us, I've gone to tiny events that blow my mind because they did such a good job of making the end user experience, making my experience as an attendee feel really good. Like it was a smooth process for check-in. It was people were kind and thank you so much for being here. And it didn't take a ton of money to do that. So I think I'd also say get creative because like it's about how you make people feel who are at that event. And so you can do that in ways that don't require a ton of money.
Yes.
Yes. Would you say ditto?
I'm thinking like this is like ditto. Everything Stacey said was right.
Wow, for once,
yeah,
Andy
like
agrees.
you need me to validate your opinion, right? That's like the last thing Stacey needs from me. I think I might just be the worst person to ask questions like this to, because I really, so you're coming from the corporate sector, you're moving into the nonprofit sector, and you're immediately dunked into the deep end of fundraising events, which, to be perfectly honest, the reason, my opinion, obviously, the reason people have fundraising events is because asking people for money and giving them nothing in exchange except for a good feeling is really uncomfortable. It is an uncomfortable thing to do, and you have to be practiced at it. You have to be good at it. You have to know why what your mission is going to resonate with the person you're asking money from. It's a complicated thing, and a lot of boards and a lot of organizations like freak out at that and think the only way I'm ever going to get anybody to give our organization money is to trick them. We're going to have some sort of product that we can then exchange this product for them to give us money. So because an exchange transaction makes perfect sense in the sort of world of commerce that we live. So they understand that. They understand buying tickets. They understand bidding on things. They understand auctions. All of these things make sense. Asking somebody for money for nothing other than, this is a good reason to give me money is because this thing is going to happen is super, super hard. So my opinion is like a lot of times, and we've gotten in trouble for saying this, is like fundraising events a lot of times are the lowest effort way to get people to give you money. They're the highest cost way for people to give you money. Some donors, we've said this before, some donors only want to give using this mechanism. They can't be convinced that your mission is important enough for them to just hand you a check. For those donors, like they want to be able to write it off on their corporate credit card, and they can use their corporate credit card to go to this event to pay for this thing, and a portion of that is going to go to your nonprofit. So I think understanding, especially since you're new, spending some time like sort of understanding the universe of how fundraising events fit into all of the different mechanisms that you use to raise money for your organization, I think would be a really, really good first step. Like, how does this dovetail with the rest of our relationship building with our constituents? How does this work with the people that we're actually trying to serve? Like, how does this fundraising event affect them? Or is there a way to use our relationship with the people who receive our services to make this fundraising event more effective from getting people to understand why your mission's important? I mean, I think there are a lot of bits and pieces you can put in before you just go, let's throw a party and people are going to give us money. And part of this, I think one of the reasons I've become more jaded about fundraising events over time is, well, two things. One, as soon as I walk up to the registration table and some person I've never met who's wearing like a black t-shirt asks me for my credit card so that they can put it into their auction system, right? That's initially like the first step is like me, like wanting to, my cheap self, wanting to resist handing some person my credit card so that I can buy crap that I didn't want in the first place, right? I'm instantly like on guard, and then I'm on guard for the rest of the event. So like I'm already in the wrong headspace to appreciate it. The other thing is that, Stacey and I both live in Las Vegas, and the base level of opulence in Las Vegas is exceedingly high. So if you're listening to this podcast in someplace else where you're not in Las Vegas, like basically everywhere else in the entire planet, right?
Yep.
If you're listening to this podcast anywhere else on the entire planet, you go into a gala event and having a nice dinner in a conference room or like in a ballroom and having a band. And that might seem like something that's really, interesting and new and fun. Here in Las Vegas, it's like, so boring, right? It's like anybody can go have a really good dinner and go have a party anytime they want to for like, and not have to be asked for their credit card at the beginning of the process too. Like this is a joke, like with people, like if you've ever been in the lobby of the Bellagio, like there's more art in the lobby of the Bellagio than there is in some whole cities,
right?
right? Like really good art too. And you living here, you become really sort of like, you expect that that's what the lobby of a hotel is supposed to look like because you've been in that one. And then you're in, I was on site at a client site doing some stuff a couple of weeks ago or last week. And, the lobby wasn't that nice.
Yeah.
The coffee wasn't even very good, right?
I'm sure. I'm sure.
So there's like I get super jaded over like, do I really want to have to drive downtown in Valley Park so that I can have some marginal chicken and listen to an auctioneer try to sell me a trip to somebody's crap vacation home in Cancun that I have no intention of going to? Like I'm already annoyed by it. And that's not the position you want somebody to give you money to be in. They don't want, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just like, I've been doing this too long and I'm too curmudgeonly about like, which I'm sure is probably the case.
Well,
but I don't know.
I guess I think there's an opportunity for this person as a new person to also think outside of the box. So I have seen people do some really, like take an event that's the standard rubber chicken dinner, that's the really boring program, and really spice it up and make it super compelling. And so I think there's ways to do it. And so like that would be a challenge I'd have for you to help overcome people like Andy. And sometimes, in all fairness to me, like after so many events, if they all feel the same and sound the same, I start to forget whose event was whose. And that's not what you want, right? Like, so I guess I just say, how do you make it memorable? And that could just be memorable about how did that experience feel different than like the other experiences I've had. So if you have a budget, or if you're even able, like a board member buys a table and wants to fill like a seat and you're able to go, check out what other events are doing, because I think that it'll give you a sense of how you might be able to position your organization a little different and maybe use some of your corporate ideas to help with that. I also think different kinds and sizes of events. If you were hired just for events, right, you're kind of stuck in the event like box, but I'm like, maybe it's a small like house party event, or did you ever see one of those events, Andy? And I'm going off tangent here, but like I was so excited about it. It was like little was like, I don't know, like a snail race, or like whatever, like something where like you watch, and it tied into like the mission, or like a duck derby race, and you bought your little, like instead of a Kentucky Derby, right, you got your little tag around the little duck in the pond, and anyways, it was funny, and they found a way to tie it into their theme and their mission. But like I remember sitting there going, this is so different, and it's kind of just fun because it just feels, I think people, if they're going to an event in general, they're doing it because they want kind of an experience they couldn't get normally. And yes, in Vegas, we're totally jaded because of all of the amazing sort of entertainment and restaurant options we have. But I don't know. I think there's some room for it. You can make it a really small, intimate house party event. If you've got some options to do that, like mix it up. Like I'm actually excited to see what you do with it, because I think we need some different ways of thinking about it. I think the nonprofit sector, part of what you're feeling, Andy, is like people are getting tired of the same format, the same kind of thing. I mean, And it's just like, not another event. And that's what people feel, which is where the dragging energy comes from. So like, how do you mix it up and be like, so I think it's a challenge. It's an opportunity. And you'll have to invite us, and maybe one of us, like me, will go. I'm not sure Andy will go. So
we'll go. Stacey and I will go, and we could be like Statler and Waldorf from
Yes.
the Muppets, and just you can hire us to just sit on the sidelines and complain about everything.
I'm up for that, and just as long as you give me a glass of wine along with it. So.
A senior level position is open in my organization, and I'm interested in applying. I've been at a manager level for the last 4 years, and this new position would be a director level position where I actually get to manage staff and have more of an oversight role versus being a doer. Do you have any advice for how I can put my best foot forward?
Yes. So I think you get to think about what are the differences between both roles and how can you ramp up your skills? So I don't know if you've ever managed people, sounds like you're not doing that even in your manager level position now. You have the manager title. We see this all the time in nonprofits, right? And there isn't, but you have no staff under you, but that's going to change if you were to get this director level position. So that leads me, if I'm on the hiring side of this, I'm looking at you going, okay, how do I know you know how to manage? Or how are you going to learn? Or what makes you qualified then for this role? And so I think you have, a chance to whether, to think about those things, look at that job description for this new position and figure out how you show that you're either getting yourself self-trained or mentored or working toward it. Or the way you approach it, or you've read some books on management or whatever, podcasts, whatever. But just to show you're actually really hey, here's my thought on it. I haven't done it before, or I have done it before. And here's, and being able to answer the questions. My 2 questions for someone in this position, if I were interviewing them, would be, so what makes you think you want to manage people? And what would be you're going from kind of an implementer and execute, doing execution to moving to management. So why do you think you want to do that? Talk to me about that. And, I'd give them some case studies, and I'd also say and what's your, what have you learned from others that have managed you? Those are the kinds of things. I think just really sort of thinking about that is going to be important. And I also think sort of the positioning piece of this. So that old adage, dress like the job you want. So I sit there and I think all the time, people make the mistake of they don't change any of their behaviors. If they're looking to do this internally, people are watching what you're doing. So how you're showing up at meetings, right? Are you staying quiet and on the sidelines like you always have? Or are you more engaged and maybe using your voice more? Are you sitting there with all of the sort of, employees that seem like they're just kind of checking in and out of work every day and don't actually care? Or are you actually, literally strategically sitting in a space in the room that shows you're mixing it up? You're not just staying with the same old people. How you're presenting yourself out in public. Are you, if there's an event the organization has, I've seen people do this all the time where they go sit at a table, right, at the side of the room. They don't network with anyone. They don't do anything. And then you kind of go, okay, you look like this is painful to be here. So I don't know, thinking about just how you're showing up on all levels, internally and externally, is probably my best advice. So that was a whole lot, but but that was sort of, I guess I just I'm sensitive to this, Andy, because I hear people say they want this, and then I see them doing just the opposite. Not, right? They don't change their ways, right? They're yeah. I want this new job. But then I'm internally going, well, you don't really act like you want it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, and I've seen it in different organizations. I've seen it very different. So some organizations are really into taking people that are in line level roles and then moving them up. This person is a great They do this one job really, really well. So let's move them into a management position. And then either they do amazingly in some cases, or they don't do well. And honestly, I don't know. As I was thinking about this, I can't think of like any behaviors or anything that is split the good people from the people that didn't succeed as well. I think whether or not you're going to get the job is like, not to be a downer, but your organization already knows. Like they've already decided that they're going to put you in this position, or they've decided that they're not going to put you in this position. Regardless of how well I guess your interview could be a disaster, but they already know you. If you've been there for 4 years and you've been doing work for 4 years, they know all of your habits. They know what you're good at. They know what you're not good at. They know who likes you, who doesn't like you. So the decision about whether or not you're going to fit in that role really depends on what other people they interview and whether or not they have somebody else come in that they think can do a better job than you can. So I don't know that at this point there's a whole lot you can do to like make people know that you're going to do well in this job. I think it might be too late for that. So maybe if we just assume you are going to get it, assume you are going to get it. And the best advice I ever received for something like this was I had a manager, and this had happened where I was moving from one role into the organization into another role. And the second role had much more leadership. The first role was really tactical. You're going to do these things and you're going to be done. The next role, I was supervising people. I had more responsibility over big aspects of the organization. It was my first big step up. And the guy that hired me to move into the executive director at the time, he said, don't do any of the things that you used to do. Like in your old role, make sure you're not doing any of those things. Somebody is going to backfill for you, and your responsibility is to let them do it. Don't ever do that job again. And I think that was really good advice, because the instinct, you, at least for me, like I'm going to gravitate to what's familiar. Like when you watch this new person come on board and they do what you used to do and they do a really terrible job at it, you're like, I did that really well and you're awful. And you really want to go in and fix it for them or help them out. And if they ask, sure, be friendly, but don't ever regress and do the old job. Only focus on what your new job is. And I think that'll set you up. I think that was really good advice and not something that I'd thought of before either.
It's good advice. And I guess I also think about this in a larger picture. If you're working at a job and you are thinking about like upward mobility and where you can move up on the food chain if the opportunity arises, I think you always want to sort of be thinking about how do you continually sort of position yourself so that you are, to your point, Andy, like when the time does come and the position opens up or there's a new position, someone goes, wow, I've really seen a change in Stacey, right? Like she's really kind of put her best foot forward. And she seems like she's just being a little more, she's asking some really, thoughtful questions in meetings. She seems like she's getting out of her comfort zone a little. Like, I think we should consider her or, whatever the case is. And so I guess I just always think to some degree, right? Like we're always a little bit on a job interview at like, if we're looking to be a kind of our best selves and continue to move upward. So it doesn't just happen when a position opens. It's kind of like, hey, be ready for it. Because it could happen unexpectedly and you never know.
So at the end of like a YouTube video, there's this, it's a meme now, right? Where at the end of a video, they say like, be sure to like and subscribe and support me on Patreon. And right. Yeah. Every single YouTube video does that now. Yes. Lots of podcasts do that at the end. Like you get to the end of a podcast and you're like, oh, I'm just going to fast forward through this part.
Totally.
So we're not going to do that. We don't want you to do anything. We want to thank you for sitting through this with us, for listening to us yammer on about things we think are interesting about nonprofits, answering your particular questions. We want to, instead of asking you to do something for us, we want to do something for you, which is answer more questions. So next time this little thing pops up, the only thing you really need to do is just click it again, and we will be here for you, your little internet family, your little podcast family, sitting here waiting to chat with you about nonprofit issues.
I
Think
feel
about
like
us
this
like
is
that.
a moment, like a kumbaya moment. Like, I just want to hug you. This is the virtual hug coming your way.
Okay, so instead of liking and subscribing and all that nonsense, just hug your device. Whatever you're listening to, just give your device a little hug, and Stacey and I will take that to mean that will be the validation that we've done good work today.
Hey,
and it might make your device feel nice too.
And you
I
know
don't
what? Make your device feel nice. We'll feel those vibes, and maybe take a picture and send it to us. That would be hilarious to just like
We
post
will.
that on our social channels.
I promise you, if you send us pictures, you can probably do that anyway. If you send us pictures, I will make, if unless they're like not appropriate, I reserve the right to refuse naughty things. I'll make it the background for the little Nonprofit Everything podcast, the episode. We can have a different special episode like thumbnail.
Yes.
And we can make that the thumbnail. That can be the background for the Nonprofit Everything episode. So send us pictures of you hugging your device or your pets or whatever, and we'll start putting those in the background.
Have fun with it.
Because we're in charge of this. We can do whatever we want. Stacey and I literally could do whatever we want.
Bam, boom.
And no one can tell us
bing.
different.